All right. What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the Boardroom Podcast. We have another guest today. Super excited about this one. Before that, a little bit of housekeeping. Joseph, how was your week?
It was good. Getting back into routine. We talked a little bit about last week. We were out for Thanksgiving, and I've been out of routine for sure. So just getting back into that. Last month of the year, we got a lot of last minute things we got to do for clients. So just getting ducks in a row, and back in the office today filming. So excited.
Yeah. We've mentioned it before 100 times probably now, but all of our internal meetings focus around it. But this time of year is really hard for work, understandably so. We've just got people in and out of the office, traveling, going home to see family, all these other things, and it's really hard to keep that focus, that rhythm about you when all this is going on. But yeah, it's a tough time of year. It's also a great time of year. I get so excited about the Christmas season. You know, something about it, going downtown, all the lights are out there and everything like that. The Christmas tree in the house. I don't know, just this time of years.
For business, we also have a lot going on. I mean, this is when we bring a lot of new clients on. A lot of people are hitting us up at year end thinking about, okay, the new year's coming around, taxes are coming around. Maybe this is the first time they thought about it all of 2023. So we're busy here as well.
Staying busy, which is a good thing. That's a blessing.
Yeah, Garrett, why don't you introduce our special guest, and we'll get him on screen here in a second.
So today our special guest is Adam Weissman, an attorney here in the content creation space based in New York. Super excited to have him on. Because he'll give a different perspective than probably what we've gotten in the past. Great attorney for just the space in general, and I'm really excited to hear him. I'll let him give a little bit of an intro and a background, but let's introduce Adam Weissman. Adam, you there?
I'm here. How's it going, guys?
Awesome.
It's going great, man. We're glad to have you here. Just go ahead and give us, as well as the people listening, a little bit of background on who you are, how you got into becoming an attorney, and then we'll get into some other questions after that.
Sure. Yeah. So name's Adam. I run a firm called Weissman Law, which, if you can tell, is my last name. The practice I've had since about 2017, but I've been a lawyer since about 2012. Actually, I'm from Canada originally. I was up there practicing for the first 4 years or so. Started off as a litigator. So I was in court fighting over things that I don't really want to talk about today, to be honest.
There's some good stories there, though.
There's definitely good stories, probably for a different podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But over a sequence of events, I ended up in New York City in 2016. Have a bit of a background in the arts and entertainment myself on like a personal level, and started sort of getting in with different people. Got in back in 2016 with a bunch of people calling themselves food influencers, which at the time was just a total unknown commodity to me. I got to tag along with a couple of them and get a whole bunch of free meals, and they would just take pictures of it halfway through. Didn't quite understand what was happening. I ended up starting my own firm in 2017, and some of the very first clients I was bringing in were in that influencer space. And within 4 or 5 months, was meeting more and more people. Ended up working with a pretty big influencer agency at the time, which was, again, kind of unheard of, because it was still, that industry was still so new and so fresh. So the fact that there was actually companies out there working in the space was a big deal. And that just sort of steamrolled into a career in the space. So today, I do probably close to half of my work in either content creation, working with influencers, working with managers and agents in the space, also doing sort of broader commercial work. And then the other half, which is really complementary, is more in the traditional entertainment space too. So while I'm doing a lot of influencer work, I'm also doing independent film, working with photographers, doing other things that, especially today, as everything's going more and more online, it just kind of like jumps back and forth. And I find myself wearing that influencer content creator hat in all spaces anyways. So that's kind of where I'm at today.
That's awesome, man. I think that's a really unique way to kind of come into the space, and it sounds like it was pretty early on too. I mean, I know with Facebook, early 2000s was around into 2010 and stuff, but I feel like that 2015, 2016, 17 was when things really started taking off for influencers and people realizing, okay, there's a lot of money to be made here just through online content. So Um, I know for some of the other attorneys that we've talked to in the space, or even just other professionals in general, they maybe came in, got a big wave of their clients through 2020 with COVID happening and that explosion of it. But it sounds like you were in there on the front end. That's super, super cool. How much would you say of your time is devoted to, I know you said it's kind of split, online influencers content versus more traditional entertainment?
Depends on the week, but it ends up being somewhere in the middle. I think that the biggest difference between the stuff I'm doing more on the content creation influencer side versus the other areas is it moves fast. It's real quick. You get contracts one day with the expectation that you're going to sign it the next day. So like
Mm-hmm.
I have incredibly quick turnaround time with that stuff, whereas the other stuff moves far more slowly. So, it's hard to measure it out definitively, but any given week, there's a whole whack of stuff on my desk that I need to get through for that, while the other stuff is moving at its own kind of different pace.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would you say that's a expectation of the industry and just like how people operate, or is it like a lack of knowledge and they just don't really know that things take time, or what?
Yeah, I mean, look, the pain point for anybody working with a lawyer is they tend to slow things down, but like in the brand space specifically, if they're reaching out and they want to start a campaign 2 days later, there's just not time to kind of go about things slowly, especially when a deal might not be as big as a big film deal or a big commercial photo shoot deal or something. It's just something that you need to put the time in right now
Mhm.
and make sure it's moving. Because if you miss certain windows and holiday seasons and shopping seasons and whatnot, there's no point in running specific campaigns. So it's a function of the industry for sure that like you have to keep on top of everything. You have to be able to get through those contracts quickly, identify issues quickly, sort of have like a secondhand, or in the back of your mind, like just understand the lingo and understand how the industry works. So everything's just second nature when you get a contract that hopefully nothing you're seeing is too out of the ordinary. You can just deal with it as soon as it hits your desk.
Yeah, I think that's the constant back and forth with professional services in this industry is with a content creator, especially the younger ones, they're so used to everything being fast. I mean, everything else in their life is. If they want anything, Amazon, anything like that, you could just order it and have it in
DoorDash.
2 days. And it just doesn't work with professional service a lot of times. Like you have to be on top of it. And even if you are on top of it, you still may see a delay of a week or a month, depending on what you're
Yeah.
doing. We work with the IRS. There's nothing fast about them oftentimes. So our hands are somewhat tied, even if you're on top of everything on your end.
And then
So
it
Yeah.
becomes about setting expectations with the client.
Yeah. I mean, look,
constant battle.
I can get a contract and assuming I have time, get it back to the other side within an hour, hour and a half, depending on what's happening that day. But then sometimes you'll have a brand or an agency on the other side disappear on you with their legal team for a week and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough. And balance you have to strike is too, especially with people who are new to the industry and maybe being an influencer is the first time they're being handed contracts and
Yep.
being given any sort of real money. It's like contracts got a lot of complexities to it. You don't want to rush through it. You don't want to make mistakes. You don't want to accidentally sign away your rights for the next 3 years when you're only getting paid for something that should have been a month long. And taking the time to appreciate that, it's tough. It's a lot to digest, especially that first year where you're doing it, because my experience, most of the influencers start off without having any help, any support. They're being given contracts by brands. They're just signing it sight unseen. And unless they have somebody in their life already who's telling them, hey, slow down, you got to take a look at this contract, they're not going to. So often by the time I'm brought in, maybe a year or two into somebody's career, it's like we've got to educate you a little bit and show you that maybe the way you were doing some things in the past, yeah, it might be great for keeping things as fast as possible, but you might be hurting your career in the long term.
That's a great point. I think you're seeing that. I heard this point come up recently with NIL, with college football and stuff like that, of college sports in general. But, these 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds coming into college, this is the most money they've ever seen. They're just signing it away whenever they might be signing away endorsements, opportunities for the next 10 years of their life. And it's wild that in certain cases brands are taking advantage of people, but that's the nature of it. And I think it's really important in our space for creators to realize that whenever they have a huge rise, these brands start reaching out, they are seeking, some kind of attorney or agent to be able to support them and at least say, let's just read through this. Let's take a minute and do that. I know, Garrett, you and I have seen that quite a few people that we talked to somebody one week and the next week they're like, oh, I signed with these people. And I'm like, how'd you even have time to check on this,
It's funny. I'll say, and not to cut you off, Adam, I think it was a defensive lineman for the Florida Gators went to the NFL, and he had basically signed as part of an NIL deal in college that he was going to give some kind of commission, some percentage to this company for like the next 10 years. So when he goes off to college and the NFL, he's getting these brand deals and sponsorships, endorsements, all this stuff. That company came back asking for a percentage of it. And he's like, no, but he signed the contract saying he would, but he didn't know at the time because he was so young. It obviously got pushed through. He just wanted the money, the NIL money, and there's some predatory nature to that from probably the agent. You see things like this, and Adam, I'll say kudos to you in a world that pretty much demands we always go fast, keep going, get everything right now. You're saying slow down in a lot of cases.
Well, don't get me wrong. I think part of why I've been pretty successful doing it this long, and I look at my colleagues who are doing it, it's the lawyers that continue to do it and continue to do it well are usually in small firms like myself. They have the ability to be quick and be sleek and
not a lot of red tape.
Not a lot of red tape, so they can keep up with their clients. But like, I sometimes slow people down, but for the most part, I'm trying to keep up to speed. I'm trying not to be too much of a bottleneck. If they were working with large firms, that'd be a bigger issue. But going back to that NIL thing, it's interesting to see because the NIL's like for college athletes, it's new still, right? It kind of reminds me of the explosion that we had with like Instagram a decade ago. And whenever there's a new industry that has a way to exploit people, you get these vultures, for lack of a better term, that are coming out and then are just going to try to get the most advantageous deal. And the scary part is if you're like an 18-year-old coming in to the industry for the first time, whether it's as an athlete or as an influencer, you assume everybody's got your best interests at heart, and sometimes it takes a minute to realize whether that's actually the case. So we're going to see a lot more things like that. We're going to see a lot of young athletes signing things that hurt them for a long time because they just assumed that whatever that piece of paper was handed to them had their best interest. But you got to know that, like, until you know definitively, until you actually take a look at what's on that piece of paper, you can never assume that.
It's a market economy. Anytime there's money in any industry or anything like that, if the money's right for the taking, people are going to flood in there to do it. I mean, you could look at it as a negative, but you could also look at it as we saw an opportunity in the content creation space for accounting, tax, all that. I don't think we're vultures, but at the same time, we didn't go into it saying like, man, this is a really saturated market. We should try and break it. Like, no,
I wasn't
opportunity.
I wasn't referring to you guys as vultures.
Oh yeah, no, you're good.
I didn't expect you to have to defend yourself.
What's the saying, Adam? It's when a man with money meets a man with experience, the man with the experience gets the money and the man with the money gets the experience.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what we're talking about here is, you got kids running into things, and if they don't have somebody like you in their corner looking out for their best interest, sometimes telling them to slow down, they end up in a bad spot.
Let me ask you this, Adam, because I think we've just mentioned it now a few times, and it just makes me think about it with some of the creators that we service. Do you see, we keep saying the word kid, do you see a big correlation between age and the people that come to you that really know what they're doing and set up their business correctly versus maybe don't? Because I know for us, before you go, that there's not always a correlation. We service some young creators, but we also service some creators that are 30 years old plus that maybe still don't, even at 30 years old, really know what they're doing. Do you see a correlation with that, or is it, I don't know, is it random?
No, it's pretty random, like you just said. I think there is sort of a threshold though, because if they're already coming to me, it means they're putting some thought into it.
Sure.
And they are taking at least those initial steps. And I don't expect anyone that comes to me to be fully set up. The whole point of working with me is or any other lawyer is you get somebody to help formalize you,
Mhm.
set up your companies, right? Look at your contracts properly, get all those things in place. Um, the thing I love is I see, I'm in my mid to late 30s, and I'm getting to the point where I'm older than a whole chunk of my clients. And there's a whole generation of younger creators that really care about putting together their business the right way. There's also
Mhm.
older generations too, people my age, people older than that, who are doing it. But it's really random. I think that, I work with some artists in other areas that have been doing it for decades and are far less organized than the people in the early 20s that have just started in the last year or two. But it
Yeah.
really just depends on the individual, not on an age group. I don't think you can generalize like that.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And it's interesting that you see that as well. I mean, both of us, we may be somewhat biased to your point. When we see them come to us, they've already reached out or maybe worked with another accountant or another attorney prior. So we might have a biased group to that, but I definitely agree with what you said. Let me ask you this, because you noted on something that I wanted to ask you about, which is why would someone come to you? What is kind of the main things that you service clients on? Um, just a general, and then also maybe like some of the things you enjoy doing versus some of the things that maybe you're trying to get away from.
Sure. Yeah. So, if you're an influencer or a content creator, your business. I think you have to recognize that first. And businesses can get in trouble. And usually the first thing when any creator comes to me who hasn't really done anything to start is, let's talk about forming a company for you, whether it's a corporation or an LLC. And I usually get help from accountants on that part, like yourselves, to figure out the best tax structure for that. But as far as like shielding yourself, it's all right. Let's start. Very first thing we're going to do, put together what's called, if you're just an individual influencer doing your work, we'll call it a loan out company, which you start signing all your contracts through that. You start protecting yourself. So if something goes wrong in a campaign, your company's going to get in trouble. Not you personally, holds all your personal assets. So that's one piece. Sometimes we'll do trademark searches and trademark registration if you're working on a pseudonym, with a pseudonym, or you've got a brand that you want to protect. Those are sort of other startup things. Depending on what you do, um, some of the more, I'll say, traditional influencers who just get brand deals thrown at them, I'll just review those and negotiate those for them. But some of the other content creators I work with are a little bit more like, I'll call them media companies, also almost, where they're producing things. And my job is then to help put together contracts that they're going to use. And sometimes those are contracts for the people they hire.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those are actually contracts back to the brand, where their work is a little more bespoke than maybe your typical influencer. So we have to come up with some paperwork for them. So those are kind of all the initial things I would do with them. And then going forward, as things go on, help them with deals as they come up, help them with disputes when they come up. There's other things on the side that I like to do. If they don't have an accountant, I usually recommend one right away. One thing that's being asked for more and more by brands these days is making sure that people have insurance set up. And I've been helping a lot of content creators in the last year or so talk to different insurance brokers and set up the right type of insurance for the types of campaigns they're doing. So there's a whole litany of stuff, but it's those preliminary things, setting up the company, contracts, trademark registration. I'd say that's not the most exciting thing, but it's something that I need to make sure all my clients have before we really get into the actual meat of the work that they're doing.
Good. Well, I was going to say, I mean, that's incredible, because I don't think anybody so far has been able to put in words what you just described and make it that simple. If I'm a content creator looking at what you just said, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what an attorney does. That's why I would need one right there. That just jumps out to me. I mean, that's perfect. And Jamarian, you should obviously clip that at some point, but that alone, you just said it. All those things you just listed, incredibly important, and that doesn't even touch, like you said, the meat. Like you haven't even really gotten into it yet. This is just the beginning steps to get a creator where they need to be from start to finish. Well, no, just the start, I guess, but getting them set up properly. And like you said, it's not sexy. How much of that do we deal with, Joseph, where we have nothing sexy about the setup and all that stuff, and then we do bookkeeping and taxes, and that's not sexy, right? But it is so important. And all the things you just described, so important. And I think that's where accountants and attorneys work hand in hand, because I'll happily tell people, I'm not setting up your LLC. I'm not doing all the things that you just listed. But we also are doing the taxes and the bookkeeping. Those are things you're not going to do. It sucks to some degree, because a lot of times if you're a smaller creator, you can't afford to have both the attorney and the accountant. But man, is it nice when you have both, because you have two people at any given time looking for your best interest.
Yeah.
Looking for your best interest and like coming at it from totally different perspectives. Because I don't, yeah, the only tax stuff I know is through working with accountants. I get it secondhand. It's not stuff I advise on. So anytime something pops up on my end where I'm like, this sounds like a tax issue, I just get to go, hey, chat with your accountant and come back to me, or we can even all chat together. And it's the best protection you can get, because you're really looking at it from both angles.
Yeah, no, Garrett, you're spot on. I mean, there's so many times where people in maybe the initial call we have with them are asking about setting up retirements or what is the benefit of doing this. And it's like, we got to get your prior year return filed first. We got to get some books set up. Maybe they don't even have an LLC. We're like, okay, there's some initial steps that we can't even move past first. And then we can start getting some of this advisory stuff that we actually probably like doing more, but we need some of that other setup first. So you're spot on there. One thing, Adam, I wanted to ask you about that you touched on that you do that I don't think we see that often is the trademark stuff. We've talked to one other attorney about this, and they recommended it highly. And I know we've talked to you additionally about it. Speak on that a little bit, how important you think it is for these maybe solo creators who maybe they're live streaming or they have a YouTube that they're making all their income from, that they have a trademark for their name.
Yeah. So trademarks for those who don't know, it's basically the type of intellectual property that protects your brand name and your logos and your slogans and things like that. Anything that would kind of come back and identify you as a brand. It's definitely not something every single content creator needs to do. But if you are using a pseudonym, like a stage name or something, or if you have created your own brand name, brand identity, that's more than just your personal name, you'll want to look into getting that as a registered trademark. You can also potentially register your own individual name, but that's not something I look into too much for too many people, because you get some innate protections there anyways. But basically, if you're coming to me and you're going, hey, we got to set up a company, well, the first thing you need to do to set up your company is pick a name for it. And this might be a company that you never use the name publicly for. It might only show up on contracts, and that's okay. But I usually tell clients, like, if you're going to take this company name, present it to the public at some point, we want to make sure that you're not going to get sued for trademark infringement. So usually before even setting up a company, I'll say, hey, let's spend a couple hours. Let me dive into the trademark registries, which is a federal publicly available registry of all the trademarks out there. Let's do a bit of a web search. Let's do some business searches and see what's out there. And it's basically just trying to get ahead of any possible arguments that other people could have that the name that you've chosen is theirs.
Just some due diligence.
It's doing your due diligence. And like the thing I hate the most is working with a client that's been using a name for years for their company or their business, and then suddenly they go, oh, there's too many competitors out here with this name, or they get a cease and desist letter and they're like, what are we going to do now? And you look into it and you're like, well, you kind of should have looked into this before. Like, why are we having this conversation now? So it's something that's, I think, incredibly important depending on what you're doing. Again, if you are just running the business in your own personal name, it might not be that big of an issue. But if you are putting any thought into a brand, then you have to spend time doing that before you really launch and you start going.
Adam, it sounds like in a lot of cases, what you're describing is actually more art than science. And I'll relate it to, a lot of our decisions for creators are based on revenues, right? We can say, like, it doesn't make sense for you to do this tax thing until you hit a certain amount of revenue. You, on the other hand, at what point should somebody look into getting a trademark or something like that? Is it like a certain level of brand awareness, like so many followers or so many impressions? It's not, it's not tied to money. It's tied to, how likely is it that somebody else would try to take this name, right? And I'm asking, I'm not stating, I'm asking you.
Yeah, no, it definitely, everything about trademarks is more an art than a science. And it's pretty subjective too, because at the end of the day, it comes down to like, all right, is this name confusing other people with this name? And there's never a scientific answer to that. right? It's always like someone has to decide that, someone at the trademark office, or worse, a judge has to decide that. As far as when to go about it, so trademark exists the second you start using a name in business. It's there, it's yours. The registration is the next step you want to take to basically get a public record that you can show the world of, hey, this is my name, this is my logo, whatever it is. Government's basically said this is mine as of this date. And then if you ever need to sue somebody, you actually need that trademark to be registered. So usually what I recommend is do the search before you start using the name anyways, because that trademark's there the second you start using your name, and you can get sued the second you start using it if you're actually infringing somebody else's. As far as registering it, the earlier the better. There's no upside to waiting, I'll say. And it's, of course, the downside to any of this stuff is it costs a little bit of money. But if you do your research properly, it's not going to be that expensive. Where it gets really expensive is if you don't do the research, or you did the research and you decide you're going to take a risk anyways, and then suddenly it gets flagged and there's somebody out there with a similar name, and you go, oh shoot, now I've got to spend some serious time fighting this. But it's smart to do it as soon as possible. The other thing too is, particularly, if you've got an audience of people who love your brand and love what you're doing, if you continue growing, there's going to be people out there who try to steal the name from you. And if they get to registration before you, yeah, you're going to have an argument to be made that they shouldn't be able to register it. But that's a lot of work. And anytime I'm working with a client, I want them to avoid that. So it's like, let's register as soon as you can and just get that out of the way, so it's not something we have to think about in the future.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Changing the topic a little bit, and this is something that I just really want to hear your opinion on. For us as accountants and somewhat advisors to our clients, one important thing when we start working with clients is goals, right? We talk about what their business goals are, what is their next year or 2, 5 look like, because it gives us a good picture of how we can help them best. And I know we've talked to other financial advisors about this exact topic, and that's kind of their starting point too, is I can only help you to the extent that you know what you want and what your goals are. How much of that do you do when you start working with somebody, or is it more one-off project stuff? They need an attorney or they need representation, and that's kind of where it ends.
Yeah, a lot of my clients I've been working with for years, and kind of see their careers evolve with them, which is great. And it depends on what they come to me with first. Some people are literally just like, hey, help me form my company, and then that's it. But the clients who want to have those conversations, it's sort of twofold. On the one hand, I'm doing your standard legal stuff of like, all right, we got your contracts in place, we're negotiating campaigns. We got to make sure for your longevity's sake that you are commanding the amount of money that you deserve, that you're not granting too much, that you're not agreeing to exclusivities for the next year that's going to hurt your business. That's kind of the short-term stuff. The long-term stuff, it's actually really interesting, especially like having been in the industry now since like 2016, 2017. And this is not something that is like a formal role that a lawyer necessarily plays, but it just sort of comes up organically. It's like, all right, what's the trajectory of your career going to look like? Because I've now been working with people who've been doing it for 5, 6, 7 years. And a lot of people in the space have difficulty sustaining what they're doing for a long period of time, and trying to figure that out, trying to figure out how you can, continue to maintain and grow your audience and not let things get stale is tough. So part of it that I'm seeing a lot of these days is creators taking, I'm sure you guys talk about him all the time, the Mr. Beast route, which is like, you're not just one guy. You've got to build a team, and you've got to plan things, and you've got to develop stuff over time, and you have to keep making things, a little more dynamic, a little more interesting. And part of that is, working with me, again, to go back to the boring stuff, like setting up your contracts. How are we going to set you up with other people who are going to help you out? What's that going to look like? What's long-term partnership with other people look like? And those are things that it's pretty rare that that's the first conversation I have with people. But, if I'm working with people for 2, 3, 4+ months, it comes up eventually. And that's where we sit down and start talking about like bigger picture items. But again, that's that's not the role of a traditional lawyer. That's just something that seems to have happened over time with a lot of my relationships with a lot of my clients.
That makes sense. I know for us, it may not be always a question we can answer, but we can direct them to you, or we can direct them to another financial advisor or somebody else that can, answer their question better. It's not always a question for us, but.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And hearing you say that, I have a question for you, and this relates more to your business and how you're running things, and I guess how it's kind of developed over the years. I have an idea in my head about when we send a client to an attorney, and it could be for something as simple as an LLC registration in the state. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, it's more than the LLC registration. Like, they need to talk with you, even if it's just for that in the beginning, because ultimately that is going to make them much more likely to come to you with a trademark question or anything like that. They have a trusted resource now. And for us, that helps us out a ton. Like, if they already know an attorney or somebody they can talk to who is obviously in the space, do you, for your business, do you like that approach where, you basically start with the LLC and maybe it's just that one-off engagement in the beginning, but it leads to so much more? Or do you like working with a client who is maybe already established, has the LLC and everything, but obviously kind of has that meat that you referred to earlier, that they have the big billable project, whatever it may be? What do you prefer, I guess, to start with a client? Would you like an experienced client, or would you like somebody who starts out knowing that the relationship could grow from there?
It doesn't make a difference to me. It's less that and more the thing I do like, which is in both of those relationships. It's like, okay, are you gonna come to me when issues pop up that aren't just your simple, hey, I need to form corporation, I need to, register a trademark. If you have an issue on a campaign and it's sort of starting to skirt into legal territory, are you going to be comfortable just texting me and say, hey, can we get on a call? And that can happen to somebody starting up. That can happen to somebody who's been doing it for a decade. Um, and building those relationships are what's definitely the most satisfying part of the job, because I wouldn't call myself part of my client's day-to-day team, but I'm there in their corner, and knowing they can reach out to me if anything goes wrong is a really satisfying part of the job. On the one hand, because I just enjoy figuring out those problems, but on the other hand, knowing that I'm sort of close at hand and able to help them out helps them avoid bigger issues and lawsuits. Like I mentioned, I started as a litigator. My favorite thing is figuring out how to not get sued these days.
Yeah, that makes total sense. To that, kind of to piggyback off of that, a different question I have for you was, like, how important do you think it is for these creators, influencers, solo entrepreneurs to have a team around them? I mean, I know for us, talking to our clients, we may be the only person on that team, and they literally film their content, edit their content, post their content. They manage their business all by themselves, and we're the only person. How important do you think it is for them to maybe have an attorney, have an accountant, other team members around them, that they're really operating a company versus doing it by themselves?
I think if you want any longevity and you want to make this into your career, then it's crucial. There are a lot of people who just kind of get into it on a lark, and they're just making money on the side while they have their day job, and they have no intention of growing it into anything. And that is totally fine. I have clients like that who will reach out once they need help with one discrete thing, and never hear from them again. That's great. But I think if you want to do this for any period of time and you want to continue growing, you need people in your team. You need your accountants. You should have a lawyer, depending on what kind of content you're putting out there. You might need a post-production, like an editing crew, or a dedicated videographer or photographer, so you're not doing all the stuff yourself, or you can continue to make higher quality stuff. So it's crucial. And I think on top of that, what's even more crucial when you are building your team is figuring out who you really get along with. And that's actually kind of the most difficult part of it, which is like, don't settle for the first professional or first post-production person who falls in your lap. Make sure you actually like them and get along with them. And if you are building out a team, view it as these are hopefully people I'm going to be working with for years, not just something that I need to get one and done. Like, if you don't jive with that person well, it's probably a sign that you're not gonna be able to build a long-term relationship with them.
That's a great point. I know, Garrett, you like it when we have people come to us seeking out an accountant and they basically say like, okay, I'm meeting with a few this week. And it's like, it's refreshing because we know they're taking it serious. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Jamari, and I'm going to involve you really quick. When he said all that, can you translate that? Am I doing this right? Do you want to make sure the vibes are right?
Yeah, the vibe. Yeah,
the
you gotta
vibes.
make sure
Okay.
the vibe's good.
Okay, so both Adam and I, and Joseph's getting there. We're a little bit older, so to the younger crew watching this, you got to forgive us. We don't have the lingo or anything like that, but the vibes, correct, J-Man?
Yeah, vibes.
The vibes, okay. So Adam, would you agree that we're just trying to make sure the vibes are there with our client, right? We want somebody we can vibe with.
That's exactly it. And I tell my clients, like, if you don't like talking to me, like if you dread getting on a phone call with me, I don't think it's going to work out long term. And I'm not going to make the nonsense claim that all my clients are my best friends or anything like that, or that they absolutely can't wait to talk to me every day. I'm not that stuck up, but it's I know that most of my clients, at least I get along with them. You know, if we were to grab coffee, we'd have a good time chatting for a couple hours. And that they trust me and they can rely on me, and like we're comfortable talking to each other. And that's pretty important. And if you don't feel that way with your lawyer or your accountants or really anyone helping you build stuff out, particularly at this level where like the business is so dependent on you and what you do, then it's going to be a problem and it's not going to work out. And you should look for other people to work with. So yeah, I feel the same way when someone says I'm talking to 2 or 3 lawyers and seeing who's the best fit. I go, great. That's what I want to hear. I want you to come back to me knowing that we're starting off with a good foot, not that you've just chosen me because I'm the first person that showed up on Google.
Yeah, I think being a trusted advisor is obviously the most important, but I think being relatable is important too. Being able to just understand them, know the context of the situations they're dealing with. And I think that's one thing that me and Garrett, I mean, getting into this business and Game On Financial, like we're young, we like the game, we understand the industry. And I think that's helped us a lot. Just talking to potential clients, potential leads, because we kind of know where they're coming from. We watch their content. If we don't watch their content, we go and watch it after. So we really understand kind of where they're at in their journey of content and this career. And that's huge because a lot of people don't, and a lot of accountants don't, a lot of attorneys don't. And I think, Adam, I'm sure you're able to get on a call with clients, potential sales call, and really understand the context of the situation they're dealing with instead of just, yeah, I do contracts or I can set up your company. And that's kind of where it ends.
Yeah. And I think when you're sussing out a lawyer, especially if you're coming at it from a content creation space, there are a lot of attorneys who have been phenomenal commercial contracts lawyers for years, but might not have ever dealt with an influencer campaign, which has its own unique quirks. You know, got to make sure that they understand that. And if they don't understand things like, I don't know, the different types of boosting on the different platforms or something like that, then you got to question whether they're going to be able to understand everything that's needed for that campaign that you're bringing them on for. So like, you know, poke your lawyer a little bit before you commit and make sure that they really have that industry experience with it. Kind of like you guys said, like make sure that they care about what you do, and that they appreciate it and they understand where you're coming from. And like, they don't have to be fans of what you do, but they at least have to get it, which is a big deal. And if your lawyer doesn't get the work you're doing, then they're going to be missing out on stuff when they're advocating for you.
Yeah.
Question coming off the back of that, and I, initially wrote the question to be who's your ideal client, but kind of phrased a different way. How important would you say communication is between you and the client? Obviously, your job is to communicate with them and maybe represent them, but communication in the standpoint of we can only help you if you communicate with us. I know Garrett and I have experienced this with clients before, regardless of how large their business is or how well they do as a business, we cannot help them because we simply can't get them on the phone, or we can't get them on a call, or can't get them to respond to things we need them to do. How important do you think that is for you as an attorney? And have you seen issues with this of just getting clients to actually respond to you or listen to your advice?
Yeah, no, it's really important. I've been lucky that most of my clients are really engaged, so it doesn't come up too often. But occasionally, I'll have somebody who they go to you. They're just like, we just want you to do your job and fix this for us. And if you don't spend the time talking to your advisor and giving them the context they need, they're not going to do a good job. I won't be able to do a good job if I'm reviewing something in a vacuum. And on top of that, one of my favorite parts of the job is educating my clients, where it's like, especially if this is the first couple of times I'm working with you, I'm going to spend a little more time. And this could be maybe after we sign the deal and just as a debrief, but like, I still want to spend a little time getting on a phone, explaining all these technical concepts that I was fighting for on your behalf or pushing back on, and making it into plain English so you can know why I'm doing this every time. Because there are going to be situations, particularly if you're in the influencer space, where you're kind of thrust into uh, a situation where you can't necessarily call your lawyer immediately. You might have to give a quick answer on something. So having that toolkit of understanding like some basic intellectual property and copyright and contract issues is huge. It makes my job easier in the long term. So like, I want to know that my clients want to learn a little bit. So by the time they've been working with me for a year or two, they're not lawyers, but they definitely are better advocates for themselves.
I love that. I mean, I love educating people and teaching people. I always have. I feel like in high school there was a chance I was going to become a coach or something, just because I really enjoyed that. And there's a huge part of that for our business as well. Just like, we want to educate them. We want them to understand maybe they don't know the tax law, but that there's going to be a tax implication of a certain decision made, but whether it be good or bad. So to your point, we see the same thing. And I think that's, we're always kind of trying to throw in there is, we know they're not going to be excited about getting on a call about their tax return or, a quarterly tax plan, but we want them to have a good idea of what's going on over time. If they've worked with us for a year, they should know more about it now than they did before. We want them to be engaged for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. You can't replace that. Going back to an earlier thing, actually highlighting that, you almost can't get to the education piece until you get all that muck in the beginning out of the way. You got to get all the setup done. And of course, you're explaining why we're doing all this. But once you get things rolling and you have the relationship, I mean, a sweet spot for us is usually 6 months to a year working together. Now, all of a sudden, we've got you caught up. We've got everything where it needs to be. We're ready for tax season, maybe even the next year. Now we can educate. Now we can talk about this is why. Like, now you're starting, because you can explain all this in the beginning, but until they see it and they see it in action, they see it working, and it's like turning over every month. And it's like, we have to tell clients, like, we don't have a lot to talk about this month. That's a good thing. That means we've done everything up to this point, like we're where we need to be. That is, you can't replace that, but it's hard getting there. Like, that setup phase it's just a grind to get to that point. I'd encourage anybody, that is a professional relationship with any, with an accountant, an attorney. There are some one-off projects that are quick and fast and all, but if you're trying to have an existing relationship and keep it current, you've got to get through that like first 6 months, that grind, get through it. And as you stick together, how many clients this year are we going to have just a fluid tax season? It's going to be almost a non-event because we've been working with them for a year. Or 2 years.
But it takes two to tango, and takes that partnership mentality of like, we are truly partnering with these people, and they need to do the same on their end. Adam, to shift a little bit, and on the topic of education, let's talk content. I know you've been making some content recently. Obviously, we're creating some content right now at the podcast. Give us some context on why you started creating content, and just how you've been enjoying it. I've been seeing some of your stuff.
Yeah, I got on. I've been on Instagram myself since probably 2015ish or something, just doing my own thing. And if you search hard enough, your audience can find me there. But I started a channel on Instagram and TikTok for my firm earlier this year with some help, to be honest. And like, going back to the idea of building out a team, I couldn't do it by myself, and I have some folks helping me kind of in the back end put that together and schedule stuff. But a lot of what I've been doing has been recording videos and just getting some basic legal stuff out there, talking to content creators, talking to photographers, talking to filmmakers, all types of people I work with, because the end of the day, I get a lot of outreach every week from people who have questions that frankly I wouldn't feel comfortable charging them to give the answers
Sure.
for, because it's just simple stuff. So a lot of what I've been doing is just, recording some videos and getting them out there, talking about issues that are relevant in the spaces I work in. In between that, kind of have this, it's like a nice flow where I'll do a meme every Sunday based on some really corny legal stuff, do some tips on Tuesdays, do some fun facts on Thursdays. There's some other stuff out there, but just building out this feed of stuff that I've never really done before, which has been a lot of fun and actually really eye-opening to how difficult it is in the first place. Because even though I'm getting help, I got to tell you, like that first time I went to sit down and take a selfie video, uh, it took probably 3 weeks for me to get a 20-second video done, because I'm just looking at myself in my phone and I'm just like, oh, this is awful. And wow, it's a lot of work. It's been really satisfying. I get some really fun feedback from people on it. And also the clients who see it, I think appreciate it, because they know that I'm physically in their space and testing it out for myself, and just like trying to learn more and more about it, not from a legal perspective, but just from like a functional perspective of how it works, which comes back and does help me with the legal stuff at the end of the day anyways.
We've had a number of people say, hey, I saw your podcast, I saw your tweet, I saw this, I saw that. That's been good for us. Let me tell you how nice it is to have an attorney or somebody like that, somebody who's not us, doing content. I can send one of your Instagram videos or reels or whatever to a client and say, like, hey, you need to go talk to this guy. Like, you need to go talk to Adam. He knows this stuff and all that. But not only am I referring them, which there's some level of trust there, and so, like, they'll probably come talk to you, right? But also they can see it. They can see you. They can... It's that parasocial relationship. They can kind of almost in their head build like, oh, this is what this guy looks like, sounds like. And then when they get on the call, it's not like this big like ice bucket of water to the face of like, how does working with an attorney work? There's a lot of anxiety around it.
Well, because everybody that's going to one of these conversations has an image in their head of what it's going to be like, right?
Right.
Whatever it is. And generally with professional in the space, it's probably the old white-headed man in a tie, suit and tie. I mean, that's what we always joke about, but it's true. And to your point, I mean, having content out there of just who is this person? Maybe they seem relatable. Maybe one of your videos truly helped them. They're like, oh, okay, this is something that I need to do for myself. Maybe I should look into a trademark, or maybe I should whatever. That's huge. And yeah, I mean, I guess a question on the back of that is like, what have the challenges been on that? Has it been time? Has it been like actually just getting comfortable in front of the camera? Because I know Garrett and I can share our own, pieces as well, but
we struggle with all of it. I'll tell you that. We do everything you can think of, time, get in front of the camera, all of it. So still do.
Yeah, no, time is the biggest piece. I mean, especially when you've got a busy week of legal work, it's hard to put any attention to the social stuff, because ultimately that comes secondary to my client work. Coming up with stuff is surprisingly easy, just because it kind of flows from the work. If I deal with a weird issue one week, obviously I have confidentiality obligations, so I'm not going to talk about it specifically, but I can, talk about the issue in a general way the next week, which is great. Getting over that like discomfort, I don't know if you guys tell, I like talking. So as soon as I was just like, oh, this is just like talking in front of an audience, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if you even go look at the evolution between now and the last 5 months, you can already go like, oh, he's way less stiff.
I think some of it's just coming from doing it. I mean, you just have to do them over and over just to get there. Every creator has experienced that, but no, it's really cool. And I mean, I'm glad that, as Garrett said, I'm glad that there's other people doing it in this space. I think it's really, really healthy for this industry.
I think we're going to see a lot more professionals doing it. And part of it too is like, I'm fortunate enough that I don't need that to drive business. I've been word of mouth for the most part since I started, and which is the case for a lot of lawyers, but there's probably going to be a need for a lot of professionals to do more of that just to get their names out there, particularly as, things go more virtual. And like you said, it's creating that parasocial relationship, because a lot of times the first time I meet my client isn't in person anymore. We do a lot of video chats. There's some clients that frankly I've never met in person. So it's really helpful to have those extra sort of like connecting points with them.
Coming from your background, I'm sure you have a greater respect for that. You know, as a litigator, you met with every client in person because you had to,
Mhm.
right? So, yeah, there's some level of respect to that. We come from that more traditional background as well. So I prefer it this way, the way it is now. I think we can do better work this way. But at the same time, you know, if you don't have something to compare it to, it's harder to have that level of respect for it.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean for this industry, content creation and just online um, profiles. I mean that's how it works, right? You go to somebody's page, how many followers did they have? You know that social proofing is validating who this person is, how trusted they are, all those types of things. So it's important to have your name out there. I mean, I've been somebody who has also been on social media for a long time, but more of just consuming the content than putting it out there. And I think now we've realized how important that can be for our brand, Game On, and then obviously just our personal selves as well. So, I mean, to speak to that a little bit, Garrett, that's kind of how you started everything with Game On. It was like your own personal Twitter pretty much, and it's just taken off from there. So it shows how important it really is.
Well, we are running on the 45-minute mark. So I think we started about 12:15. Adam, are there any final thoughts, anything you want to add in? Obviously, take your time. We're not rushing you by any means, but we don't want to keep you. We know how valuable your time is. I trust we'll receive a bill for this time at some point.
Yeah, the
But no,
clock's
is there
running on
anything
the
else?
top left of my screen.
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I mean you guys are pretty comprehensive. I think really at the end of the day, it's just like there's no, and this goes for me and all my colleagues in the space. Like there's no reason to be apprehensive when it comes to speaking with lawyers. You'd be surprised at how many of them, if you reach out, are willing just to have a chat and get to know you before you even necessarily need anything from them. So if you are on the fence about working with somebody, flip it, go to the website, flip them an email, like check them out, see if you can get a 20-minute call for free on the books and just chat with them. Because at the end of the day, like lawyers' jobs are just to help you. They're not some like scary, suit and tie behind a wall thing that you have to worry about. So
Sure.
getting out of your comfort zone and chatting to a lawyer, chatting to an accountant or anyone is kind of crucial for longevity. So I would just say, like, if you're thinking about it, just do it. There's no downside.
As a closing question, and your answer that you just gave might be the actual answer, but what would be just the first steps for somebody who's never worked with an attorney, or maybe they're starting their business off? What would you say their first step should be? And maybe, like I said, maybe it is the answer you just gave.
Yeah, flip them an email, send me a DM, honestly, and just be like, "Hey, this is what I do. Could I get on a call with you and just understand what working together would look like?"
Sure.
And you know, I guarantee most lawyers you write to will write you back and say, "Sure, let's hop on a call sometime in the next couple of days," and just take it from there. And it might be that, hey, maybe it's too early to start working with somebody, or maybe you need to get your ducks in a row before you start. But knowing that that person's there, so when it is time, is huge. Knowing that there is somebody you can call that within a few days' time can be your lawyer is great, because the last thing you want is to be in a situation where you absolutely need a lawyer, but you have no idea who you're going to talk
Where
to
to
about
start?
that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I mean, we can definitely speak to that, the importance of having a good attorney, an agent, somebody to do all the things we talked about on this podcast for you. And then obviously we stress just having a good team around you. So if you're a content creator watching this, influencer, somebody in this space, and you don't know where to start, I mean, obviously, just as Adam said, hit him up. We can definitely vouch for Adam. We know other attorneys in the space. Just reach out to someone, because doing it on your own, as we said, is not going to work out well probably in the long run. So, Adam, we really appreciate having you on. Garrett, do you have any final thoughts before we close this thing up?
Yeah, Adam, if we're going to flip you an email or find you, where can we do that at?
Yeah, so you can go to www.adamweissmanlaw.com, or you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Weissman Law, and it's WEISSMANLAW. Nice big logo with my firm name on it there, so it's pretty hard to miss. But like I said, email me through my website, DM me on Instagram. Happy to get back to you. Usually, the person you'll be hearing from is actually me directly. So just check any of those spaces out and reach out if you want to chat.
It's never been easier or more accessible to talk to an attorney as good as Adam. Adam, we thank you for coming on. Obviously, we'll link all the sites, the logos. I was going to say logos. I'm thinking trademark. All the socials in the description below. You can find Adam at any of those. Go check him out. Like Joseph said, we can definitely vouch for him. He's incredible at what he does. Outside of that, I think this has been, I don't know what episode we're on now. I've
24.
24. Episode 24 of the Boardroom Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Go check out Adam. Thank you for coming through.
See you guys next time.